Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the last conversation with a doc for 2024. I always say that we're lucky, but we really are lucky to have Esther with us. Some of you may have heard her speak at our symposium about 2 years ago, and you know what a great speaker she is and what a great story she has to tell. For those of you who have not heard her before, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a terrific session. And Esther, I'm just going to turn it right on over to you so we don't waste any time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. And I have to preface this with I have a little bit of a cold that I'm getting over, and so my voice is not 100%, but we're going to power through it because, as you may or may not know, a lot of times people with Parkinson's, we do struggle with our voices. So we're nothing if not resilient. My name is Esther Labib-Kiyarash. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to pronounce my last name. Judy already fell out of that. I'm 49 years old. I was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease in February of 2023. I live in El Paso, Texas, with my husband of 21 years and our two children, Daria, 13, going on 30, and Cyrus, 11, going on, I don't know. I always feel like boys, they mature a little bit slower, but I always tell him, don't grow up too fast. Growing up is like super overrated. I'm married to a wonderful man named Fareed. He's Persian, which is where this crazy name came from. My kids were in about second grade before they could even spell their own names or fit it on the page. So without running out of space. So one thing I know for sure is I am the only Esther Maria Labib-Kiyarash on the planet. So that's kind of cool. And as I mentioned, my husband's name is Fareed, which means unique, which is also kind of cool. I was a healthcare administrator by profession. I worked as a hospital quality director, risk manager before my diagnosis. So I know just enough about healthcare to be really aware of what is wrong with it, but not enough to really fix it. I left my career shortly after my diagnosis to spend more time with my family, focus on my health, and volunteer for various organizations like this one, the Young-Onset Parkinson's Network, and the Parkinson's Foundation, where I sit on an advisory board for the Southwest chapter. And I am an ambassador for the Parkinson's Foundation and a research advocate. I want to thank Judy for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit about my journey with you this evening. I had an entire presentation prepared this evening with the PowerPoint and everything. And then a few days before Thanksgiving, my mother sadly died.
Oh.
Exactly 4 months to the day after I lost my father. And I started to reflect more about grief and hope and how they change when you lose the things and the people that anchor you. My story starts like so many of us, not sleeping, a small tremor in my hand. My right foot was always rubbing against my shoe. I remember a rather heated argument I had with my husband, which is a very rare occurrence. He's a very laid back person. And I accused him of not listening to me. And he said very sternly, I try to listen to you, Esther, but I can't hear you. Nobody can. Your voice is too soft. I was working as the director of performance improvement at a hospital when my hand moved completely on its own for the first time. This was during the pandemic, and especially difficult time for hospitals, and especially where I live in El Paso. The Hispanic community was very hard hit. We sustained multiple waves that were reported on the international media, and many, many people that we knew lost loved ones. I was under a lot of stress. We all were. My husband is a hospital pharmacist, and he was on the code team at the hospital, which means every time somebody went into cardiac arrest, he was in the room. And sometimes he would spend his entire night in an endless series of codes. It felt like we were surrounded by death, that it was the end of the world. The schools closed down. All my friends stayed home, tucked away in their cozy houses. But my husband and I left every day, driving on eerily empty freeways to the hospital to work. The local YWCA made an agreement with the hospitals to take our children as children of essential workers, but it was strange and a foreign place for them. I wanted to be with them, learning remotely from their kitchens like our friends, but we had work to do. I wasn't sleeping, but I felt like none of us were. I would wake up with this feeling like my insides were shaking and my shoulder hurt and my neck all the time. I thought it was my purse was too heavy, so I switched to a tote bag, then a backpack, then a crossbody, but the pain never stopped. I had no idea what was going on with my body. Why was I staying up till 3? Why was I waking up to the feeling that my head was shaking inside? Why did my neck turn stiffly like an old rusty chain? Why was I cold all the time? My hand didn't start shaking in the beginning. It was more like a feeling. My hand felt like it wanted to shake. I would look at it expecting to see it move, but it didn't. It was just a feeling. But how could I go to the doctor and say that? It sounded crazy. Like, I feel like my hand wants to move. um, I asked a physical therapist that I worked with at the hospital, like what he thought. He said it was probably carpal tunnel. I did a lot of work on the computer. I bought a wrist support, a different mouse, a brace, but the feeling persisted until one day in a heated meeting in a conference room with a coworker, when I was like barely containing my rage, my entire arm just shot up. And everybody looked at me and their jaws kind of dropped. And I made a joke about it, like I always do, like, I'm so mad at you, girl. I want to hit you when I can't even control my own hand. But when I got back to my office, I knew like this wasn't funny and I needed to go see a doctor. Something was like very wrong. I didn't even have a doctor. I was like 46 years old. The only doctor I saw was when I had my babies in my yearly pap smear at my OBGYN once a year for my well woman visit. So I found a primary care physician and began the almost 2-year process of getting diagnosed. When I first saw my first neurologist, it went by so fast. She just said, "Hey, tell me what's been going on." I gave her my spiel, talked about the shoulder pain, my hand that moved sometimes on its own. She just said, "Come with me." And she took me into the hallway. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to ask you to walk. Just walk up and down the hallway." I thought, why does she want to see me walk? Like, there's nothing wrong with my walk. And I like proudly did my best Cindy Crawford supermodel walk, hips swaying. And we walked back into the exam room and sat down, and my husband was sitting next to me. And she said, "Have you ever thought about Parkinson's?" And I said, "Not if I can help it." But I'm bump. And I laughed, and she was not laughing. Nobody was laughing. And the rest was like a blur. I remember asking to go to the restroom and sitting there on the toilet and crying. We were still wearing masks then, so like you couldn't see the tears, but I mean, everybody saw that my eyes were red. She didn't say anything comforting at all. She immediately started talking about how I needed to have an in-office EEG because if I didn't get the EEG, then the insurance wouldn't pay for the DAT scan. I didn't know what a DAT scan is, but it just all was like that Charlie Brown parent voice, like want, want, want. And I was trying not to look at my husband because I didn't want to even imagine how he was reacting to this. So we left the office and we're sitting in the car. And well, before we left the office, I do remember that the doctor said one thing. She said, "This isn't going to look like you think it's going to look." And I thought, this is the stupidest thing anyone has ever said to me in my entire life. Me and my husband, we went to the car and I was sitting there and we're driving home in silence. And I was just thinking like, this is it. Like my life is over. How am I going to explain this to my kids? They're too little. I cried a lot for like a day and a half. And then my husband came up to me and he's like, "Esther, you cannot keep crying around the kids. Like you're freaking them out," which was a very valid point. I was scared, but there was no reason to scare them too. So my husband and I regrouped and did what anyone would do: blame the doctor and go find another one. Fortunately, if you know any Persians, you know doctors. So turns out I had just spent the previous weekend at a kid's birthday party at a Chuck E. Cheese all day with another neurologist in my town. So my husband called me at work and he's like, go to this hospital and ask for this doctor. So I left work, I went to the hospital. And as soon as I showed up, they were like, oh, you're the VIP we've been waiting for. I got white glove treatment all the way to straight to the back. And he took one look at me and said, you don't look like Parkinson's. And I just let out a huge sigh of relief. I mean, of course I didn't look like Parkinson's. How could I? There's no way I have Parkinson's. I'm like way too young. I'm a soccer mom. I don't have Parkinson's. And I drove home and I called my husband immediately and I was like, he doesn't think I have Parkinson's. And my husband said, thank goodness, because I didn't want to say anything to you before, but Parkinson's is the worst possible disease you can have. There's no cure. The treatments are horrible. This is so great. Like, I am so relieved. And the words were still like hanging out there, like in a cartoon bubble. And I remember thinking, crap, he just jinxed me. Like, I definitely have this disease. This is the worst thing possible. But I put my hope in that doctor. My hope was that I didn't have Parkinson's. So I started having tests and MRIs and blood draws, a spinal tap. Eventually, they said that I had some markers for multiple sclerosis, MS. And I thought, well, that's good. My husband said, well, that's good because at least there's like treatment, real treatment for MS, you know? But I had a friend with MS and something didn't feel right about that. By then I was about 3 neurologists deep. My friend, my second neurologist, had moved to Dubai, and my hand tremored more, not all the time, but daily. Mostly when I was mad or sad or glad or pretty much any time I was having any kind of emotions. It reminded me like a dog's tail. That's how I felt. Anytime I got excited or upset about anything, my hand would shake. I figured out really early on that stress made everything worse. So I quit my hospital job and went to work in a smaller community health center where I tried to stress less and figure out what exactly was causing all this. MS never felt right to me. Over the course of the next year, I continued with business as usual, get up, get kids ready for school, go to work, lather, rinse, repeat. I put off going back to the doctor. I let months go by before scheduling the follow-ups for all the different tests I was having. I had a brief breast cancer scare, but that ended up working itself out, fortunately. But I was feeling worse, tired all the time. I would go back and the doctor would say, do you feel better? And I would like have to laugh because I'm like, no, you haven't done anything. Why would you think I'm just gonna go home and go to sleep and wake up and feel magically better? Like, that's not how it works. At this time, my husband's only sibling, his beloved sister, was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. The cancer was removed. She started chemo. He would travel back and forth to be with her in LA anytime he had a day off. So we didn't see much of him. It was just me and the kids a lot. And I kept my doctor visits to myself. I was clinging so tightly to the idea that I did not have Parkinson's. That Christmas we spent Christmas Day at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA as my sister-in-law endured unimaginable pain at the end of her battle with cancer. I went to her room and she was so small and frail. I was trying not to let anybody see my shaking. And she took my hand and she said, life is full of surprises, Esther. Enjoy every moment you can with the people you love. She passed away shortly after that, and my husband was absolutely consumed with grief. I didn't have the heart to burden him with my stuff too. I had already scheduled an appointment to get a second opinion about my MS diagnosis with the Mayo Clinic, but I postponed it to attend her funeral. The week after her burial, I saw 2 neurologists at Mayo. And it was funny because one of them examined me and then left, and then the other one examined me, and then they conferred. And they came in like very solemnly, and they said, "We don't think you have MS. We think you have Parkinson's, but we want you to see someone called a movement disorder specialist." One of the great things about Mayo is that I got to see somebody that same day, a movement disorder specialist. I actually went out and had margaritas at a Mexican restaurant in Phoenix. And then I came back and I met with the movement disorder specialist, and we did the all of the things, and they did like a smell test, and he said, I'm diagnosing you with Parkinson's disease. And after over 2 years of not knowing, and all of the stops and starts with different diagnoses, I was actually really relieved when he said that, because for some reason, having a label, like having it have a name, made me feel like I could then take action. Like I could figure out how to beat this thing called Parkinson's. I would put my hope in information, in knowledge. Knowledge is power, right? I would find everything out that I could about this monster. And I treated it like my graduate degree, like a big graduate project. Like I read all the books and I talked to all the people and I went deep into the internet. I even watched that stupid movie, Love and Other Drugs. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It has Anne Hathaway and Jake Gyllenhaal. She's like a young woman with Parkinson's, and he's like a drug rep. And it's like this romantic love story. And it's literally the worst movie ever. But somehow the more I learned about Parkinson's, the more questions I had. And more importantly, I realized how little they really know. And I started to lose hope again. So I decided to go to a research conference, see what was coming down the pipeline. I went to a conference called PSG, Parkinson Study Group. It was in Austin that year. And I got really excited about a specific study that was being done by a company called Aspen Neuroscience on stem cells. So I went to Austin and I sat in the room and I listened, and I shook hands with the CEO of Aspen and I thanked him for his work, and I thanked all the researchers. But it became very clear to me that this was still years away, if it worked at all. And I left that conference feeling like a little kid when they find out Santa isn't real. That was my hope. The science was supposed to have the answers, but that hope was far away, years, too far from me. And I lost my hope again. That same month was Thanksgiving, and I started to have problems with my medication. I developed dyskinesia, uncontrollable movements, ironically caused by my medication to control my other uncontrollable movements. They told me that I wouldn't have to worry about it for like 3 to 5 years. But that wasn't the case for me. And here I was, like not even a year in, and I had dyskinesia. My leg would do this little dancey dance, like a little tango, every time my medication started to wear off. And I realized I had put my hope in the medication, the gold standard, levodopa. It was like a magical pill when I first started taking it. I could take a pill, go to work. Nobody knew that I had Parkinson's. The pain would go away in my shoulder, my muscles would release, my hand would start shaking, my foot would suddenly actually go all the way up off the ground consistently when I walked. Everyone around me breathed a sigh of relief. No one could tell that I had Parkinson's. It allowed me to pretend like I didn't have the disease at all. But now it was betraying me. It turned on me. I didn't have time for these wriggles. I didn't have time for this little dancey dance. I needed to shop and drive and walk. I had Christmas magic to make for my kids, baking and wrapping presents and putting up decorations, but everything was harder. Walking, driving, even standing still, I would sway and wriggle. Parkinson's didn't get the memo that it was Christmas. I spent one night sitting on the floor of my garage. In a previous year, I had stupidly wrapped Christmas lights around a wreath, and I wanted to unwrap them. And I couldn't. I mean, I was in there for like 45 minutes, and I just started crying. And when I finally got it done and I started to lock up, I realized I couldn't find my keys. I'd lost my keys. And I thought to myself, like, this is it. Here it is. Like, I'm losing it. I'm losing my mind. I've got one foot in dementia. Like, I was starting to panic. I'm tearing my house apart looking for my keys. I finally just gave up from exhaustion and I went to bed. The next morning when I got in the car, I walked by a bush and I saw my keys were sitting on a bush in my front lawn. I think they had fallen out of my pocket when I was like putting up Christmas lights. And I thought, oh, yes, I'm not losing my mind. But I realized I couldn't put my hope in the medication either, because when it failed, I became hopeless again. So as the holidays came and went and presents were opened and everyone was happy, I looked at my kids' faces and I thought, that's hope. They're my hope. Regardless of what happens to me, these moments, these memories that we're sharing, all the love I feel for them, that I give them every day, and they give me in little ways, that's my hope. But then I thought, what about when they grow up and they leave home? Will they take my hope with them? Am I going to be sitting in my living room drinking boxed wine and listening to the Frozen soundtrack over and over because my kids are not there? I thought, what about when I get sicker and I can't show them love in the same way that I do now with my actions? Will I become hopeless again? Is my family my hope? Yes, I told myself, my family is everything. Why I get up in the morning, I love them, they need me. I put my hope in the people I love. And then Mother's Day rolled around. The one day of the year that is universally accepted as my day to be carefree and worshiped and given presents, and I don't have to cook. The day before, my sister had called and said my dad was put on hospice, but not to be concerned, that he was doing fine. He was 93, and she was a nurse. And she said it was just like a way for them to get more services for him at home, like a nurse would come to the home, and more help for my mom, that they would send somebody to help her do the grocery shopping and bathe him and things. So she said we had lots of time. Don't worry about it. But something didn't feel right. And as I ate my Mother's Day brunch, I thought, I need to go. I need to go be with Dad. So I flew the next day to Austin, and when I arrived, he looked completely different than I had seen him just that few months before. He was frail and pale, wheezing when he breathed. He took my hand and he said, "You're here." And he grabbed my hand and said, "I want to die." And it was hard seeing him like that, but I thought, this is what death can look like. And he was glad to have me there, have his loved ones around him. He died about 2 hours after I arrived at his bed, and I was holding his hand. He didn't give me any words of wisdom. He didn't have to. He did that his whole life. He used to always say he lived his life while he could, traveled the world, did all the things, ate dessert first, and at the end he was happy just to read his books and pet his dog and be with his family. As I started to work through my grief, I realized I had never really grieved before. Not really, not like this. Not for my dad and not for myself, for the life that I thought I was going to have before Parkinson's. And I had the realization that we put our hope in people. But even though the people go, the hope stays behind. And that changed me. It didn't die with him. It doesn't die with the person, because the hope was something they kind of leave you like a torch. And the love fuels it, and it lights your way in the darkness. I continued to struggle with my medication, its side effects. I became depressed. Why wasn't it working the same? What was the meaning of all this loss, all this grief? Why was the joy absent from my life? Was it Parkinson's? The dreaded word apathy we hear so much about? Was I just killing time till my eventual decline? I'm kind of known for my social media presence, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I make videos about my life and I share them online. And one day I was watching, it was Mental Health Awareness Day, and I was reading all the symptoms of depression. And I thought, that's me. I have depression. That's exactly what I'm feeling. So I reached out to my insurance company and I found a therapist. I got a session online. The miracle of modern technology, you can have a therapist in your bedroom or in your basement in real time almost immediately. He asked me one question. He said, "What do you hope to get out of this?" And I said, "I want to bring joy back into my house, but I don't know how." He said, "Yes, you do. You do." He said, "What gave you joy before Parkinson's?" I started to list and think about all the things I loved, all the things that I had stopped doing over the last few years. "Then do that," he said. So I did. I called a friend that I hadn't talked to in a long time. We had coffee. I got a dog. We had lost ours during the pandemic from old age. I started baking again. I put up seasonal decorations. I joined a gym. My old one had closed during the pandemic too. I started watching movies with my husband again. Simple things, just sitting on the couch next to him. And I started to feel like there was hope again. I decided to have people in my home, to invite some friends for Thanksgiving, to entertain again, something I had stopped doing. And then I got another call from my sister that my mom had died. For some reason, I wasn't surprised by that call. I kind of had a feeling that she wouldn't live through the year. She was 92. I knew most of all that she would be very pissed that she didn't make it to 100 because she believed that anything is possible if you believe in it. And she believed in one thing above everything else, which is be happy. She used to sing that old song, like, keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. And she would say, if something doesn't make you happy, get rid of it. And she'd say it just like that, and her West Virginia accent would like come out of nowhere. Get rid of things that don't make you happy. And she did. Unfortunately, one of them was my dad back in the 80s. But I thought about what my sister-in-law had told me with such earnest on her deathbed, that life is full of surprises, good and bad, and we should live every day like it's our last. We should be happy. I made a post one time online complaining about the dyskinesia that I get in my leg, the kicking out thing that happens when my medication wears off. I call it horsey leg because it reminds me of like a prancing Lipizan or stallion that my father used to love. And a man that has ALS, who was actually a doctor, commented that he wishes he could still walk. He didn't say it in a mean way, just an observation. But it reminded me that there's always somebody that would give anything to trade places with me. Michael J. Fox has that quote. I feel like so many of us live by it. With gratitude, optimism is sustainable. I love that quote. But I also love the one by Desmond Tutu. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. I realize now that hope isn't one thing. It's not in the doctors, it's not in the research, it's not in the medication, it's not in any one person. It's not something I'm trying to reach or achieve. Just like love isn't one thing, and Parkinson's isn't one thing. We're all different. Our wellspring comes from a unique place. It bubbles up from my heart as a feeling. But I have to take that feeling and keep it alive with actions. Otherwise, it just withers on the vine. Like anything, I have to care for it. I have to grow it. I do this by getting up every day and being thankful that I can still move, something my father wished that he could do at the end. and which feels like a big deal when you wake up stiff and creaky like an old ironing board. My knee pops and my feet shuffle to the coffee maker. But I have to keep moving, make breakfast for my kids, get them off to school, tell my husband I love him, give hugs freely, give kisses freely. Every morning when I drop off my kids at school, I tell them I love them, and I feel so grateful. I water my hope with exercise, a healthy diet, trying to remember to drink water, trying to remember to take my vitamins and supplements. Because exercise is the only thing that's proven to slow progression. I try and do it every single day. I sprinkle my hope with a dose of friendship, calling, texting my friends, grabbing a cup of coffee, inviting them to go to the gym or for a walk, going to my in-person support group. Even though everybody is way older than me, we always have something to talk about, even if it's just complaining about our neurologists and our medications, and there's always good snacks. The source of my hope is deep inside me. It was always there. The result of a lifetime of experience, of loving and being loved, of life and death, of facing challenges head on and doing my best and then letting go of the rest. Leaning on people that have leaned on me, asking for help when I need it, but recognizing I am much stronger than I ever thought. And that first neurologist was right. She wasn't so crazy after all. This doesn't look like how I thought it would. My life is completely different now, stripped down and simple, one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. Because I know even though some days are hard, I always have my hope inside me.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the questions now. Some of you have already submitted questions, and I will ask Esther them. And I just don't know what to say to you other than thank you so much for doing this evening. Thank you for being you, and thank you for talking about it to us. Okay, first question. What do you know about stem cell treatments?
I actually know a lot about stem cell treatments. I just came back, like I said, last year when I went to PSG and I met and I saw the data from Aspen Neuroscience. So Aspen Neuroscience is doing what's called autologous stem cells, and that's taking our own cells and they tweak them in a little lab and then they put them back in us. And that's hoping to grow new dopamine producing neurons. Um, this was my takeaway from that and from what I learned this year when I went to two different conferences. One called Rallying for the Challenge, which is in Michigan at the Van Andel Institute with Cure Parkinson's, and then PSG that I just got back from in Nashville. So there's embryonic stem cells, which are problematic because it's hard to get fetal stem cells for a lot of different reasons. And then there's pluripotent, which they can grow in a lab, but those are expensive. They're in various stages of testing right now, and they have been for a long time. We're going to probably know about the outcome of some of these within the next year, specifically that first cohort of Aspen Neuroscience. But it's not there yet. And that continues to be my takeaway with stem cells is I don't think it's going to happen soon enough for me. I could be wrong. There's also trials going on in other countries, and unfortunately, they don't all share their data and their information, you know. But what I did learn that I think I have more excitement about is gene therapy. So GDNF, which is a neurotropic factor, is actually something that they've already shown that they can inject into the brain to not generate new cells, but to take what are called your sick but not dead cells and kind of regenerate them to connect again. And that is being, again, there's like several of those trials going on. The main one is from Bayer has thrown their hat in the ring. And I feel like Bayer isn't going to mess around with their money to on something that they don't have a lot of hope in, because they're also hoping that they can use it for other diseases like diabetes and stuff. So um, it's interesting stuff. I love the science. It's really interesting to follow it. But yeah, fingers crossed on stem cell therapy.
Next question, any kind of tips to give me hope?
Like I said, I think it's about introspection and just realizing, like, first of all, I was talking to a friend of mine today who's had this disease for like 15 years. And he's like, it's going to either eat you up or it's going to make you stronger. He's like, it's either going to destroy you or it's going to make you stronger. And I was joking with him. I'm like, I'm strong enough. Like, please, no more strength for me. But it's true. I mean, I'm like everybody. I have days where I wake up and I'm just like, I don't even want to get out of bed. But it's those actions, I think, that force that hope. Like, even just simple things. I go on a walk every morning with my dog now, and I get outside, and it's hard to look up at the sun and the sky and the trees and not feel like a little bit of hope, you know? But you have to keep that routine going, because I, especially with Parkinson's, our the dopamine controls our mood so much. I always say, like, it's really a mood disorder as much as anything, and our medication makes our mood fluctuate too. So anytime that I get out and I do things that I enjoy or that boost my natural dopamine, it always improves my mood. And it's a lot easier to be hopeful when you are having a that a better mood in general.
Okay, this is a longer question. Can symptoms come and go? I've had Parkinson's for 5 years, and the symptoms have been fairly consistent and constant. However, recently I woke up and felt almost normal. I did not have any of the symptoms that I normally have, and I decided to see how long I could go without it, which I think she means without the medication, or she, I'm not sure if it's a he or she. Anyway, which was 4 hours. But then I crashed and I was confused because mornings are rough and my meds start wearing off around the 3 hour mark.
Yeah, I mean, definitely symptoms come and go. I was actually really sick earlier in the year, and I woke up, and usually when I'm sick, my meds don't work at all. And I just had like a whole day where I felt like I didn't have Parkinson's at all. Even my tremor, sometimes I wake up with it, sometimes I don't. My heart stuff comes and goes. Um, it's just a weird, weird disease. Um, I think the main thing that I always tell people is, like, track your symptoms. I use an app, but you can just do it on paper. And then you'll sometimes find sort of what are those little contributing factors that make those fluctuations happen. But and then if they persist, then I talk to my doctor about them. But when I quit my job and I reduced stress, I had a whole clusters of symptoms that just went away. But then when my dad died and my mom died and I was grieving and stressed again, I had new symptoms crop up. But it's just the way that the disease is.
Do you have any tips for the caretaker of a spouse who has recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's? For an example, should I get medical permission slash access to the spouse's patient portals?
I would say yes. I'm not a caretaker, but I have put that on all my stuff now, that my husband has access to everything, just because of my background as a hospital administrator. I know how it is. Like, things happen quickly. And it's better to, like, be prepared. Even before Parkinson's, if I fell and I hit my head and I was unconscious, like, I would want my husband to have access to everything. But the other issue is the cognitive stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, I have cognitive issues. I forget things. And I've been kind of in this process this year in particular of trying to hand over, or at least make sure my husband is aware of like all my passwords and where I keep stuff, because I don't think it's going to happen quickly, but I'd rather go ahead and make sure that he's there and can remind me of things, not when I'm already like forgetting everything, but that it's already on his list, you know. I was doing that with the property tax. I realized he never paid the property tax. Like I always set it up, the escrow and everything. And he was like, "Why do I need to know this?" And I'm like, because I don't think I'm just gonna wake up and I'm gonna need you, And that's what I talk about in my thing, like leaning on the people that lean on us and not being afraid to ask for help, but also trying to like make sure everything is shared so I have that check and balance so things don't fall through the cracks. So yeah, I mean with the portal, with the medication information, all that, I want my husband, my care partner to have access to all that.
Next one, how can I keep up my strength?
Honestly, strength training. If we're talking about physical strength, I'm not an exercise person. I always say like the only place that I run to is a sale. Like I am not that person, but it's my job now. Like my health and my body is my job because the stronger that I am, the safer that I'm going to be able to stay because even though I don't have like a lot of balance problems right now, um, I need that strength because, I have right side symptoms. So my right side is weaker. Like it's your body's natural reaction to sort of guard and not use the weaker side. But that means you have to make it even stronger, you know? Because if I fall, I need to be able to catch something and I need to support myself, you know? And I'm a huge, huge proponent of exercise. Specifically, I've been using that book by Christine Meldrum, the How to Control Your Parkinson Symptoms with Exercise, and she talks about cycling, treadmill, cardio, strength training, balance, stretching, all of those things are so important. So many people, I think it's just enough just to move, but that there's really strong, strong data that says we have to exercise and that it actually helps our brains. And that's not my opinion. That's like fact now. So to me, it's just like medication. Like I have to exercise my brain and my body too.
Okay, since being diagnosed 2 years ago, I have been taking levodopa, which I feel has never been effective in helping with my symptoms. Is there any point in taking the meds as it causes dyskinesia, or can I carry on with just my exercise routine?
I mean, it depends. It's different for everybody. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we all know that the medication isn't disease modifying. The medication treats the symptoms. So if you don't have symptoms, like if you're okay without the medication and you're okay with your symptoms, that there's no like long-term benefit of the medication. What the research shows is that once you take the medication, it's going to help you with these other things like preventing falling and stuff like that because there is like a long-term, they call that the long-term effect of dopamine in your brain. It's going to keep you on, but if you're not having like bad on times, it's a discussion to have with your doctor. But for me, it's like I honestly don't realize sometimes like how good I'm doing with the other things, like how much I'm benefiting with the other things because I'm on medication all the time. And the dyskinesia is brutal for me. It's probably my worst symptom now. But a lot of it is also just the realization that like not all the medications are the same. I mean, I've been on like five now. I'm on the dopamine patch now, and they're all feel very different in my body and they all treat kind of different symptoms. And so it's so important just to work with your doctor and find out, you know, what works for you. But to me, it's always going to be in combination with what I call like, you know, your natural dopamine things, which are like exercise and things like that.
Okay, here's the last one. Are there any supplements that we should be taking that might help our symptoms?
That's super debatable. I am a big follower of Laura Mischley's work. I don't know if you guys are aware of her. She's a very world-renowned doctor of naturopathy in Seattle, Washington. She runs a clinic for Parkinson's, and there's tons of stuff of hers on YouTube. I actually saw her at the last conference. But when I talked to my MDS about it, he said that it was a waste of time unless that I was like deficient in something, you know, that none of the supplements were proven to work. To me, this is kind of where the science and the community, their value shifts, you know, like I listen to my doctor and I make decisions off of it, but then hear things from other people, like I said, that have been living with this disease for years, and they're like, oh, I have to take my magnesium or my muscle spasms are way worse, you know, or I have to take my melatonin or I can't sleep at night. So I will say and this is also because my husband's a doctor of pharmacy, like I'm very, very honest with my movement disorder specialist. When I take supplements, when I have taken supplements, I always tell them. To me, it's like, and this is a discussion I've had with my MDS, like, and that's what he told me. He doesn't live in my body. You know, if I take something, like let's say lion's mane. I know so many people that take lion's mane because that, you know, there's some indications that it helps with memory. If there's no downside, and your doctor knows that you're on it, so it's not interacting with anything else, and I feel like it's helping me, then I'm going to take it. I don't see any downside of it. What I also tell people though is like, don't go broke taking 25 supplements when you're not going to do the exercise, you know, because I mean, even with in supplement world, like we know what works, and it's that foundation of exercise and you know, mindfulness and relaxing and reducing stress and all of gratitude and all those things, and then the supplements add on. What I take personally is lion's mane. I take B vitamins. I take a vitamin D because so many of us have vitamin D deficiency, and I take B1, B12, and I was taking Mucuna. I took Mucuna for quite some time, but I got dyskinesia on Mucuna also. So to me, the side effect outweighed the benefit.
So it wasn't really the last question because we have two in the Q&A. So let me see if I can get to them. Okay, the mouse is just frozen. Michael, can you? Oh, the
Hi
computer.
Oh,
there.
I can,
Here
I
we
can,
go.
I
I
can,
got it. I
I
got it.
got it.
I
You got
got it.
it? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Do you still work outside the home in healthcare?
No. That was a really tough decision for me. I don't know if it was even the right decision for me, but I was fortunate enough to not have to work specifically because I had a lot of problems with drowsiness on my medication, especially in the beginning, and my commute was really long, and I kept kind of almost falling asleep behind the wheel. So I talked to my husband and I was like, I don't, I'm scared to like go to work and I don't really want to be there anymore. And he was like, just stay home, stay with the kids, be with the kids. So that's a real privilege of mine and I'm thankful for that. But I do, through my volunteer work and my advocacy, still like keep those wheels in motion. I work with the Parkinson's Foundation training. I've been trained on their hospital safety guide, so I like to educate people about stuff like that, and I try and advocate specifically for changes in the healthcare system because it's rocky out there. But no, I don't work outside the home anymore. Not, or as my husband says, like I work, but I don't get paid for it anymore.
Is your sister a source of understanding and support?
She is, and I love my sister so much. And it's interesting how when you get older and you have health problems in your family, like how that bonds you together too, and just how much more you appreciate each other, and there's so much more clarity in your relationship. So yes.
I think that really is the last question. Anybody have anything else? I want to remind everybody that this has been recorded, so if you wanted to go back and listen to anything that Esther has said, I think, Michael, it'll be up by Friday at the latest. It should be up on the website.
That's
So
correct.
is that right, Michael? By
That's
Friday?
right. Yep,
Okay.
Friday.
So just go to the MAPS website and go under events, actually, and you'll find it there. And Esther, will you come back and talk to us again?
Thank
Please,
you. I
please.
definitely will.
I'm serious. We could talk about what you were just talking about, the healthcare industry or the hospital things, because that's a big deal, what to
Yeah.
do in the hospital.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would love to. Like I said, I've just finished the training, and I've done it a couple of times now, and um it's not a safe place for people in with Parkinson's. So I would love to
Yeah.
educate on that as well.
Yeah, I had heard that from a couple of people a while ago. And you just have to, you have to have somebody there with you to really talk to the healthcare people, so they don't give you the wrong meds, or they give you the right meds, or they whatever all the many things are. So,
It's
and
for
I think that
for anybody on this call, this just happened to a friend of mine yesterday. Do not let them give you Zofran.
Right.
Do not let them give you anti-nausea medication without checking. The Parkinson's Foundation has a really good guidebook for it. You can download it. It's free. Be careful out there.
Yeah, I was just going to say about the Parkinson's Foundation book. It really is very extensive, and it covers everything, and it's great. It's great. And you've been wonderful. So I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays to everybody and to you, and hopefully a happy and a healthy new year. And thank you again. Love you.
Thank you. Love you guys. Happy holidays.
Thanks. Thanks, Esther. Good night, everybody. Thank you.